Hello, Dr. Mira Reisberg here with the Children's Book Academy. And I have just a wonderful book that I want to share with you today. It's called Martin and Anne, and it's by a former student who I adore, Nancy Churnin. And Nancy is a journalist, and she then learned how to write children's books. And now she's found her sweet spot primarily writing biographies. And this one's particularly interesting because the way she's gone about doing it. Now, as anyone who's taken an interactive course with us knows, I often talk about diversity and cultural politics in terms of own voices and writing outside your culture. And different people have different feelings about this. Personally, I feel it's a very, very tricky thing to do unless you do incredible research and preferably give back to that community in some way. But what Nancy's done, which is really interesting, is she's done this kind of like a call and response of two really important historical figures that both suffered from racism and whose spirits have, never ended, basically. They continue to inspire. And that's Martin Luther King and Anne Frank. And so Nancy's done like a bit of a compare and contrast, and it's almost like a Venn diagram of the things that are different and then the things that are similar. And I was really surprised to read that in the beginning that they both were born around the same time. In 1929, two babies were born on opposite sides of the ocean. They never met. They didn't even speak the same language, but their hearts beat with the same hope. On January 15, Martin's father, mother, and older sister beamed at their beautiful baby in Atlanta, Georgia. On June 12th, Anne's father, mother, and older sister cooed at their beautiful baby in Frankfurt, Germany. So isn't that fabulous? I also want to point out the really wonderful use of white space and the way the illustrator guides our eye to turn the page. And so we've got these two really major figures. But what happens is this tricky thing with memory, because most of us know that Anne Frank died when she was 12, and Martin Luther King was considerably older, though he was still relatively young. So it continues. But not everyone thought Martin and Anne were beautiful. When Martin was old enough to go to school, he had to go to a different one than his best friend because his skin was dark. Even worse, his friend stopped playing with him. Martin's skin hadn't changed, but suddenly his friend cared where he hadn't before. That made no sense. When Anne was ready for school, Adolf Hitler, the leader of the Nazi Party, was elected to lead Germany. Jewish children like Anne were no longer allowed in public schools. Anne's father fled Germany for Holland, but when Hitler invaded Holland, anti-Jewish laws followed. Anne's school closed its doors to her. Suddenly, her friends didn't want to play with her anymore. Here's the thing with this book, and I've read it quite a few times, and every time I get goosebumps. The writing is so effortless reading. It was not effortless to write. It was a ton of research, and even more so, a ton of editing to dig down, narrow down, and really focus on this story so that you don't get buried in the millions of details that you discover when you're writing a biography. I mean, look at this. It's just fantastic. So it's this compare and contrast, and there are so many similarities. It's just like, wow, who would think of that, of bringing these two figures together? But Nancy did, and she did it in a really, really wonderful way. Here's another beautiful illustration. My one criticism with this book, and I've shown it to other people and they don't feel the same way, and it's probably because I'm an art teacher, but it bugs me that they don't look more like, he doesn't look like Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King had a wider face and a longer forehead and lower and wider nose, and Frank, eyes should have gone down lower, things like that. But that's me being picky. As I said, I showed it to other people and they just love the illustration. I love the style of the illustrations. I love the illustrations, actually. It just bugs me that they don't look more like the historical figures. But it's very stylized. Still, it's just exquisitely done. Just very, very beautiful. I'm just going to read one other part out because I try and keep these reviews short so that hopefully one day when I have time I can also add them on Amazon or Goodreads or other places where they need short reviews. Look how, that white space again, just really nice. Now, if this person was my student, I'd have her reverse the direction the figures are going in, so that once again it's leading the viewer to the right. But that's me being picky. Just great. Look how powerful that is. So let me just read this little bit out. While Martin grew older, Anne's 15th year was her last. The Nazis stormed Anne's hiding place. They arrested her family and the friends hiding with them. Anne's diary was left behind, pages scattering on the floor of the dusty attic. But she still believed in the power of simple acts of kindness. Martin won the Nobel Peace Prize when he was 35. He worked with President Lyndon Johnson to help pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964. At last, those ugly whites-only signs were against the law. Only a few weeks before the concentration camp was liberated, Anne died, along with her older sister. She would have been amazed that her diary, rescued by a family friend, became a bestseller. Her father, the only one in her family to survive the camps, had her book published. Actors performed her words on stage and film. The cramped rooms where she hid in Amsterdam became a museum dedicated to speaking out against hate. And then the very, very last page, I'm just going to show you this. I'm not going to read it out because I want you to buy this book because it's a really important book and it needs to get in more hands. So I'll just read a little bit. Oh God, it's hard. When Martin was 39, he was shot and killed by a man who didn't believe black people deserved the same rights as white people. But no one could kill the way Martin inspired others. Just as Anne's words will never die. Martin and Anne were born in different places, but they both dreamed that one day all babies would be seen as beautiful, as all babies are. And then it's got some exquisite language at the very, very end, which I'm not going to share because I'm going to leave it as a teaser for you to buy this book or get your library to get it in. And then it's got a timeline at the end. So it's just, it's really phenomenal. It's a phenomenal, I have goosebumps. I don't know if you can see them. And every time I read it, I get goosebumps. I get teary and wow, talk about powerful. And the thing is, it's like, you know, there are a lot of questions about what's appropriate for children. And I would not use this book with very young children, but I would definitely, third grade up, I would use it. Because kids are exposed to violence all the time, and they know that terrible things are going on in the world, but what they need is they need hope. And this book has hope. It has a lot of hope. It has a lot of hope and a lot of beauty. So I hope that my showing you this book is helpful. I hope it's inspiring. I hope you'll share it with age-appropriate kids. I think this book could be used third grade up into high school, really. It'd be great to use in a writing unit of comparing and contrasting two different historical figures that have things in common, though you wouldn't necessarily think that on the surface. And I think it's the genius of Nancy that she's kind of created this form that is a form that I hope to see more of, because it's really very, very beautiful, very powerful. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.